we will have met my goal of administering 100 million shots.
He adds that any American who wants a vaccine should be able to get one by Memorial Day.
But I've always said, that's just the floor. We will not stop until we beat this pandemic.
The president says he'll announce his next vaccination goal next week. The House passes 2 immigration bills that would provide protection for immigrant farm workers and for young immigrants brought to this country as children, known as dreamers. Speaker Pelosi ahead of the vote.
It has always been a pleasure for me to sing the praises of our dreamers. They make us so proud. They help in so many ways, as the distinguished chair has indicated. So for us, this is a day of not only passing legislation, but a cause for celebration.
Both bills face a tough challenge in the Senate. A U.S. soldier is shot and killed this week, and his 13-year-old stepson is in custody. Police in El Paso, Texas, say the boy shot Alan Edwards while the soldier was arguing with his wife, the boy's mother. Edwards was based at Fort Bliss. A just-released federal report shows more than 580,000 people were homeless on a single night in January 2020. That's about a 2% increase from the same month the year before. On Wall Street, the Nasdaq plunged 409 points. The Dow lost 153. America's listening to Fox News.
Half a day. This is Jade Uggan from Security Title, and in celebration of Tomorrow Month, here is a tip on dealing with your land. You might be thinking of giving part of your property to your child or another family member. Once you have subdivided the property and recorded the map, you will also need to record the deed transferring the title. Just drawing the map is not enough to make sure they actually own the land. Protehi I Tanonmu. When it comes to your family land, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Listen to The Point. Any speaker, anytime. Check us out on your FM radio at 93.3, 104.3 HD3, thepoint.gu, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and tune in. And announcing radio.com. Download the app and hear The Point. Get the latest news, sports, entertainment, and more.
On demand.
Your phone is digital. Your life is digital. And we are too. 93.3, The Point.
Amazon Alexa.
President Biden's message to migrants not to come to America does not seem to be getting through because the surge is still growing.
A senior official with U.S. Customs and Border Protection told Fox News the president understands it's a crisis, which is why he told migrants don't come over. In addition to the surge in unaccompanied minors, the administration's also struggling to shelter and process an increase of migrant families at the border. The Washington Post is reporting nearly 60% of the more than 19,000 family units taken into custody last month were allowed to stay in the U.S. to await an immigration hearing.
The House passed the American Dream and Promise Act, which provides a path to citizenship for those millions of dreamers. 9 Republicans crossed over and voted for it, but the bill now faces a steep climb in the Senate.
Fox's Kristen Fisher. The judge at the trial of the ex-cop accused of killing George Floyd will make key rulings Friday that could alter the case. He's expected to decide on a request from Derek Chauvin's lawyers to delay or move the trial to another city because of excessive publicity.
Chauvin faces murder and manslaughter charges. In a further breakdown of the seated jury members, 5 are men and 7 are women. 6 of the jurors are white, 4 are black, 2 describe themselves as multiracial. The youngest are in their 20s. The oldest, a woman, is in her 60s. When court reconvenes Friday morning, 2 alternate jurors must be chosen before the trial can begin. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
NASA completed an engine test firing of its moon rocket Thursday. The 4 main engines of the rocket's core stage remained ignited for the full 8 minutes, triggering applause in the control room at Mississippi's Stennis Space Flight Center. The test firing in January ended prematurely. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
The vaccine is officially here, and we aren't just talking about the COVID vaccine, but a financial vaccine at Bank Pacific. We may not be doctors, but we can help you with your financial health. Whether to take advantage of today's crazy low rates or just a local bank that has your back, At Bank Pacific, we want to help make 2021 your best year yet. Because for 66 years, where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Subway's got your flavorful, fresh choices this Lenten season. Sink your teeth into the succulent goodness of Subway's shrimp and guacamole spinach wrap, or go plant-based with Subway's crisp on the outside and generously spiced on the inside veggie patty, or enjoy the classic tuna sub, made with 100% wild-caught tuna, all made with freshly baked breads and topped with garden-fresh vegetables. Get in today at any of Subway's convenient locations. Subway, make it what you want.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. If you are a small business, you may be interested in a federal program called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. This program can provide federal funds to match equity investments into your company or help you get lower interest rates at local banks. To find out more on how this program can help your small business, please contact your Guam Congressional Office at 475-6453 or at michael.sanicolas@mail.house.gov.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the Office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro has you covered this Lenten season. Try their Fisherman's Platter, grilled local catch salad, and their Lobster Pad Capro pasta. Open from Monday through Friday for lunch and dinner. Call 479-2652 for reservations.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The right of tailgaters to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So if you're tuned in today on your radio or you're watching here on Facebook, you needn't check your firearms at the door. You may continue to bear arms during the entirety of this program. And if you want to call in and tell me about your firearms, feel free to do so. 888-TALK.
888-8255.
Yeah.
I had to look it up.
888-TALK, yeah, 8255. So I start out with the Second Amendment every day. It's a tip-off of where the show goes. The show goes to the Constitution and to good conservative politics, sometimes bordering into the libertarian side. There's very little political correctness here. Now, occasionally you'll hear me refer to a person as they or them, but this is only to poke fun at the lefties. And usually when I'm poking fun, speaking facetiously, exaggerating or something, our ace engineer, Jose, will show you one of these. Yeah, and the reason I do that is that one time, well, the name of the show is Tall Tales, after all, and one time, during the period of the checkpoints that Governor Leon Guerrero treated us to, a doctor told me that she was on her way to not an emergency, but an instant call to GRMC. And she got caught in a checkpoint on Marine Corps Drive. And she wasted an hour doing that. And I, of course, embellished on that a little bit. The show is Tall Tales, so I said she was caught in this checkpoint for an hour until finally she turned around and went to GRMC from Agana via Humatak. And I got an email later on from one of our regular listeners saying, she must be new to the island. There are shorter ways to get to GRMC than going all the way to Humatak.
There's some new construction. There's that bridge.
So I decided then that sometimes I'm too subtle even for my own good. So from now on, from that day on, whenever I'm engaging in facetious hyperbole, you'll hear this. Yeah, that doesn't mean I'm doing the show from a car. and somebody's honking at me because I'm not driving off on a green light. That's
a lot of people think you bring your Model T in first edition.
That's it's just one of the conventions of the show. Okay, so we go from here to Zemi Ikotny. And today, the Daily News treats us to something from the Daytona Beach News Journal. And it's by Clayton Park, who is the business editor of the Daytona Beach News Journal. So we can't have editorials about Guam, but we can have editorials about Daytona Beach, I guess. The subject here is Atlanta area killings unsettling amid Wuhan virus. The Atlanta area shootings where 8 people were killed, including 6 women of Asian descent, hit close to home for me. At least 4 victims were of Korean origin. While I was born in this country and I'm proud to be an American, I'm half Korean and half Japanese. Well, his name is Park. Yeah. It's unclear whether the shooting victims were targeted because of their... It's unclear to who. Anybody who's not paying attention. But, of course, if you can't make a story about race, if you can't make an editorial about race, forget it. It's not important. It's unclear whether the shooting victims were targeted because of their race. Cherokee County Sheriff Frank Reynolds said Wednesday that the suspect, Robert Aaron Long of Woodstock, Georgia, claimed that his actions weren't racially motivated and that he had a sexual addiction. But it's much easier and much more fun and much more woke to stress the race angle. I find it unsettling, nevertheless, because it comes at a time when anti-Asian sentiment and violence are on the rise in our country. Some blame people who look like me of being responsible for the so-called China virus, more accurately known as the novel coronavirus that causes Wuhan virus. Well, sorry, Clayton, on Tall Tales, it's called the Wuhan virus, because that's where it came from. In the early months of the pandemic last year, one woman on Facebook commenting on an article I wrote as business editor of the Daytona Beach News Journal told me that I was a nothing who should go back to China, and I'm not the only one. The magic sample of one, right? Yeah, one person posts something like that on Facebook. You know what you call it? Systemic racism. I recently interviewed a Daytona Beach, Florida area that runs a Korean restaurant. They told me they were being similarly harassed on nearly a daily basis, both by people showing up in person to place orders and then refusing to pay for them, as well as those calling them on the phone during their busy dinner rush. Sahi Martin, who owns the Chop Chop Korean restaurant in South Daytona, isn't that kind of racist? Told me on Wednesday that she's frightened to learn about the Atlanta area spa shootings. I'm afraid. I don't know what some crazy people are going to do. Well, that's the way with crazy people. You don't know what they're going to do. It doesn't help that the shooter told police that he intended to drive to Florida to kill more people at spas. Now, here's something else. Massage parlors all of a sudden got turned into spas. And I read one article, I should have brought it along, that said these massage parlors are just fronts for prostitution. And the guy says he's a sex addict. And he said that the reason he killed him was so he wouldn't be attracted to him. The guy has obviously got a screw loose. When I read the national news report about anti-Asian hate crimes, most seem to be happening in large cities that have a larger percentage of Asian Americans. In King County, Washington, for example, where I was born and raised, those of Asian heritage account for nearly 20% of the population. Here in Volusia County, where Daytona Beach is located, Asians account for 2% of the population. Well, that's interesting. The Atlanta area attacks show that anti-Asian hate crimes, if in fact that's what motivated the shooter, can also happen in communities where there are fewer Asians. But if that's not what motivated the shooter, then it kind of doesn't matter, does it? In Cherokee County, Georgia, where the first of 3 spa shootings occurred, Asians account for 2.1% of the population. Even some people I consider friends persist in referring to COVID-19 as the China virus. Why would people do that? Why would people refer to that virus as the China virus? It's racism. When I confront them about it, I'm told that that's where it started. True, but to blame all Asians or even all Chinese for the pandemic is flat out wrong. This guy is not really very logical. He goes from some of his friends called the virus the China virus, and then he says, but to blame all Asians or even all Chinese for the pandemic is flat out wrong. Not the same thing. It suggests that we are all alike, as if we're the Borg from Star Trek. Growing up in a mostly white neighborhood in Seattle, I was constantly told Asians are good in math and not so good in English or when it comes to matters involving creativity or innovation. For the record, I double majored in English Lit and journalism with a minor in art. I also played for many years in rock bands and won a local songwriter contest in Daytona Beach area a few years ago. Conversely, I'm not skilled in kung fu or any of the martial arts, and I'm not particularly adept at using chopsticks, although I try. Alike, we Asians are not. And as far as what country I pledge allegiance to, I'm as proud as any of you to be an American. I have an uncle who fought in World War II, not against the United States Army, as a member of the World War II, not against. Missing word here, but what he's trying to say is that his uncle was in the 442nd Infantry Battalion, made up of Japanese Americans. He fought the Germans while one of his brothers was interned in a relocation camp for those of Japanese descent in California. My wife and I have 3 sons, all of whom have served in the U.S. military, including one still in the Air Force. Stop viewing us as others. We are Americans, and we are human beings who don't deserve to be vilified, or as in the apparent case of the Atlanta spa shooter, objectified. This guy's got a problem, you know. He really has a problem. One of his problems is, and this is not because he's Korean and Japanese. He's just not very logical. He strings unrelated facts together and draws unwarranted conclusions from them. But it is the daily news after all, so what do we expect? Okay, from there we move on to the Post.
Just real quick, Bob.
Yeah.
What it seems is that it's more to do about the race of the attacker than it is about the victims. And I don't say that flippantly, but there's been a number of these attacks they've deemed as racial attacks.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that they don't say the race of the attackers for the majority of these attacks.
Well,
and that's where the real story is.
Especially when the attacker happens to be one of the favored races.
Exactly.
Yeah, then it's left out.
It's going to make a lot of people mad, but that's kind of the numbers.
Yeah, really. But, of course, if you buy into critical race theory, the facts,
Bingo.
what happened, that's not important at all. It's where the oppressor is and the oppressed, and the narratives that the oppressed bring to the story. Okay, here's the Post. Time to get serious about requiring in-person learning next school year. The discussion among political and education leaders regarding the state of the island's public education system is rarely upfront. Over the years, officials have skirted the issue and spoken in generalities when looking at learning within the public K through 12 classroom. This has to stop. The future of more than 28,000 school children is at stake in these discussions, about a third of whom are high school level students. High school students face the daunting task of readying themselves for careers in academia post-high school, and they lose a little more every day without in-person learning. The past method of officials treading carefully and being circuitous in expressing their respective points of view only hurts the people who need it most, children. The trepidation in the past can probably be attributed to public controversial firings of prior administrators and a high turnover rate for superintendents prior to Superintendent John Fernandez coming along. Now, I can remember a couple of superintendents who were directors back in those days, who were fired, one of whom was served his notice at about 4 a.m. Yeah, the board had a late night meeting. They decided to fire him, and and there has been a lot of turnover up until Fernandez came along. I was part of the turnover myself. I had the job for 1 year, but I hate to spend time on the show talking about myself, Jose, just like Rush Limbaugh, but this time I have to. So yeah, I was there for a year. But I can explain my relatively short tenure, and that is that after typhoon, which typhoon was it? I can't even remember. The schools were in a shambles. The department was really in bad shape, and I was asked if I would take over the helm of the department to get it squared away, and I did. I took it over. And when I resigned, I likened my tour as the director of education as the captain of a ship who took over as the ship was about to run aground on the reef. And in order to keep it from running aground, I had to grab the tiller and grab the helm and spin it just as hard as I could. This caused the ship to keel over a little bit. It caused the ship to rock. Some people got kind of sick. Some people got off the ship. Some people jumped off the ship. I had to throw some people off the ship.
Walk the plank.
Yeah, but we got it turned around and headed back out to the open sea. But having done that, I knew that I would forever be seen as the guy who called all that rocking and seasickness and everything like that. So I decided that it would be best to hand the helm over to a new captain who wouldn't have to worry about the ship running aground and could sail it for the long distance. So that was my short tenure. I was ready to retire even before I took the position as director of education. So a little bit of personal history there, if you don't mind. Okay. Yeah, let's see. The trepidation in the past can probably be attributed to the public controversial firings of prior administrators. Even Fernandez, remember? Fernandez went for a year in a state of limbo where he was suspended with pay.
Remember? Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. In fact, on Tall Tales, one of the regular features of the show, was the daily count of how much it had cost us to pay John Fernandez up until that day. We had that cash register sound, et cetera. It got up to be pretty big bucks. Yeah, so certainly part of it. So the tiptoeing, though some may say typical in Guam's culture, ultimately doesn't really help students in our public schools who need the full, unvarnished honesty of government officials and educators so that problems get fixed and systemic failures get the spotlight they need to affect change. It's no secret our public school students lag in math and reading for their grade levels based on nationwide benchmarks. In November 2019, months before the pandemic hit, GDOE management stated in a report as published in the Post, standardized test scores indicate that Guam public school students, though progressing, have not been learning fast enough to meet benchmarks set for each grade level they're supposed to be in. We do see increases every year, so the scores generally do go up. Deputy Superintendent of Curriculum and Instructional Support Joe Sanchez said at the time, what we're seeing is a trend of maybe 1 to 2 years behind. So the average kid is 1 or 2 years behind grade level. Despite the bleak outlook, there was some growth. Results and analysis released showed DOE students generally scoring well in English, sometimes exceeding benchmarks. However, they continued to lag in math and reading. The latest analysis was published by the annual State of Public Education report, which was presented by Sanchez and Fernandez in a November 2019 press conference. Then the pandemic hit, and thousands of GDOE students have not been on physical campus for nearly a year now. We have to give the educators and GDOE managers credit for trying to reach as many students as they can in this pandemic and getting their households engaged in providing some continuity of learning from home. But we can't expect the teachers, particularly, to continue to do this without burning out. The reality of allowing 28,000 students and their households to choose from the 3 models of learning, online, in person, or learning, person learning, or picking up paper lessons leaves too many opportunities for students to fall farther and farther behind. The 3-choice system adds to the burden on teachers and parents, all of whom must work together in extraordinary circumstances to ensure their children are engaged in learning. Unfortunately, for many educators on island, many parents or guardians didn't hold up their end of the bargain. We have heard anecdotal experiences of teachers who go out of their way to drive around neighborhoods to drop off paper learning materials when parents don't show up at school to pick them up. This coming 2021 school year offers DOE a chance to streamline the learning process. There are 5 months remaining before the new school year begins. We hope DOE will make use of the time remaining to focus on streamlining public education. Let the students go to in-person classes safely, as suggested by certain advocates for improving learning in school. Board member Robert Crisostomo is one of the proponents of in-person learning. He projected a bleak future for public school students if they don't get back into the classroom next year. We've sacrificed education for safety. I think now is time to turn those tides, because we're going to have a rippling effect of this lack of education years down the road, and it's going to show if we don't address it now. Take a stand on mandatory K-8 at least. That ripple effect will cascade for years. DOE is planning to expand face-to-face instruction from its 8,600 currently enrolled students. The extent of expansion has yet to play out because the deadline for students has yet to pass. It's time for DOE and the Education Board to put their foot down. Do the Folks at the Department of Education and the members of the board have a single foot.
It's a really big shoe.
Yeah. Man, it must be hard for those guys to walk around, you know, all of them sharing 1 foot. I think maybe the sentence needs to read, it's time for DOE and the Education Board to put their feet down. Yeah. Teachers need to return their focus to one mode of learning in the classroom. They need to breathe.
With a mask.
For students, socializing with peers, stepping out of the home and into the physical campuses, and being held accountable for their behavior through face-to-face learning are just as important as turning in homework, participating in class discussions, and answering tests and quizzes. We all want a better Guam, and making sure students don't fall farther behind in their learning is one path to achieve this goal. Board member Peter Atta has pointed out there are some schools on the island that have made a full return to traditional learning. Some private schools aim to go back to full in-person classroom learning by the end of this month. Atta has asked the DOE superintendent to consider a plan to fully return to face-to-face instruction, as Atta was particularly concerned with senior high school students not receiving enough credits. In-person learning shouldn't be a choice, said Crisostomo. You have to attend school K through 8. I'm also concerned about the high school students who are missing out and not being prepared for college. And their first year in college is going to be very hard for them. And then the Post winds up with this punchline: no more tiptoeing. The time is long past for upfront discussions like this. Yeah. Okay, Post gets a blue star for that one. There it is, the coveted blue star. And let's see, that makes it, where's my card here? There it is. That makes it $244 for the Post. $57 for the Daily News and $4 for Candid. Candid's catching up to the Daily News. All right. So let's see. Let's take a short break here. I'll come back to the card.
Sunday brunch at Mezcla Bistro in Hagåtña is back.
Come and enjoy Mezcla's true taste of Guam.
At only $28.95, enjoy your Sunday with your friends and family with their free-flowing house mimosa or house draft beer. Open for 2 seatings at 10:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m.
Let Mezcla serve up your favorite local foods. Call them at 479-2652
or 479-2653 to book a reservation. Limited seating available.
Mezcla reminds everyone to be safe and stay sanitized. Sunday brunch at Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Okay, so here we go. The card for the day. I've got my program notes here. And, of course, we start out with Steve Ignacio. I don't have any fresh reports on attempted thefts of his motorcycle, but he has done other things to distinguish or extinguish himself. I don't know which. But Steve gets in here so often, I'm thinking of making Steve Ignacio a regular part of the program, like Zemi Ikotny and the Second Amendment. Yeah. I'm going to teach a little history lesson here, and one item on the card that I suspect everyone is kind of interested in, called Duenas versus Moylan. And I'm going to tell you about the Camacho-Calvo feud, and then tell you why I don't think it's important this time around. The Chamorro Land Trust Commission is on the card. The Chamorro Land Trust Commission versus the Chamorro Land Trust. The Land Trust, is at least in theory that body of real property that is under the supervision of the Land Trust Commission that is supposed to be leased out now to certain people who owned or worked land before. But, with friends like the Land Trust Commission, the trust really doesn't need any enemies. We got the latest example today. Okay. And then I point out here, some things are pretty predictable. As an example, Bavacqua versus Empty Green. I said when the controversy first arose, I said, I know what my card is going to look like. Yeah. And sure enough. And by the way, one of the things we do here on Tall Tales is we assign names to people and things. Like we've got a pretty good list of callers. We've got our Carl and another Joe and another Tim.
Drive-through Jack. And when we were talking about the presidential campaign, and it's still Washington politics, I always tip my hat when I walk past Pocahontas's teepee. But I've got a new name for Marjorie Taylor Greene. Her initials are MT, right? Empty Green. That works pretty well, doesn't it, Jose? It's spot on.
Yeah, Empty Green. So we've got Empty Green versus Bavacqua versus Empty Green on the card. And a little bit more of Tucker versus the USMC and that whole flap. And I point out that Antonio Gramsci called the whole thing, because the article I'm going to refer to refers to the Long March. And Antonio Gramsci, who was an Italian anarchist, spent 11 years in Mussolini's prison, did a lot of writing. And I'll get into this a little bit more when we get to that point, but he said the way for Marxism to prevail is in a long march through the institutions. And they are there. They have made it. They have made their long march.
At least since the early 20s.
I beg your pardon?
At least since the early 20s.
They've been on that long march, and they finally made it. Even the military. Okay, so let's start out with Chief Ignacio. The chief says, random drug testing soon, after years without it. After having gone without random drug testing at the police department for years, Police Chief Steve Ignacio told lawmakers he is in discussion with the Department of Administration to fund drug testing of uniformed personnel. It's coming soon, Ignacio said. During the hearing, Major Manny Chong, the acting police commander, said the last time he was tested and the last group to be tested was more than a decade ago, when he was still a sergeant at the department. Ignacio acknowledged that he had only taken one test in 1987 when he joined GPD, and he never fell into a random testing rotation. Drug testing is required when employees are hired into the department. Senator Brown has been vocal about her concerns over lack of drug testing in the government. Asked why there has not been a consistent drug testing at GPD. Ignacio took responsibility, stating he did not coordinate any drug testing during his time leading the department. But GPD also lost time to the pandemic, as that had been the focus, of course. Yeah, so, you know, for the next 20 years, everybody has a good excuse as to why something didn't get done. Well, you know, we were going to do it, but the pandemic. Oh, okay. Now, some of you guys out there, some of you folks out there would remember the Guam Bear. Yeah, there was a shipping company out of California. What was it? The California Far East Line. And one of the ships that called on Guam was called the Guam Bear. In fact, I think all of the ships were called. There was like a Seattle Bear and a Guam Bear, etc. Well, the Guam Bear sank before it could pull into Apra Harbor. And of course, all of its cargo was lost. So for about the next 10 years, it didn't matter what it was that couldn't be delivered. Oh, you know what happened? We had that ordered, but it went down on the Guam Bear. It was the all-purpose excuse for not having anything for at least 10 years. I think the pandemic will turn out that way, too. Ignacio took responsibility, stating he did not coordinate any drug testing during his time leading the department. But the GPD also lost time to the pandemic, as that had been the focus. As we move forward, we're returning to some normalcy. It is one of the things that I did put on my personnel officer and my administrative service officer. I think what he's trying to say there is he assigned his personnel officer and his ASO to get the drug testing started. I said, get some money, put it aside because I want to do drug testing. Because yes, I did realize it has been many, many years since that we've done drug testing at the police department. Chong said a legal opinion rendered from the Office of the Attorney General in the prior administration indicated it was unconstitutional to conduct random drug testing simply for the purpose of identifying individuals who are using drugs. Well, why else would you do it? To find out which drugs are the most popular? To find out which drugs are the most high-priced? Like market research? You have to have reasonable suspicion to test somebody. Well, I don't know. So now, because of these allegations coming out and nobody coming forward identifying a police officer, our mechanism as managers, what we're doing is that somebody in the police department is being accused of doing drugs. Since we don't know who it is, we're going to have to test everybody. That's going to justify the drug testing that we're going to be accomplishing. Brown said it is her reading of the AG opinion that random drug tests of designated positions, such as those in law enforcement, can happen at any time. That's right. You know, maybe people like cops, crane operators,
school bus drivers.
Bus drivers, yeah. Chong said the directive on testing came as a memo to the department. Believe me. Okay, I always like it when people start a sentence by saying, believe me, or honestly, or I'll be honest with you. Believe me, random drug testing is something that I want to happen on a quarterly basis, just to keep the public aware that the Guam Police Department is doing our best to make sure our officers are on the up and up, Chong said. But we're starting it now. It should have happened earlier, but we're correcting it now. Well, that's a step in the right direction. And there was an article on May 18, yesterday, in the Post, Feds investigating GPD officers. And I alluded to this yesterday. And the part I liked in this article is that GPD has launched an internal affairs investigation involving the police officer who has been named by federal authorities, Ignacio said. More GPD officers may be under the same federal investigation, but their names have not been revealed to the police chief. The other thing that came up was that other officers within the police department were part of this investigation, but they were not named to me, Ignacio said. So I don't have a name to go on. I can't open an internal affairs investigation into unknown persons within the department because I don't have a specific name to go on. I don't think so. You know, if there were petty theft from the desk of the chief, of course he would assign officers to do patrol checks, right? Now, he wouldn't have to have the name of the thief to start an internal affairs investigation. Because, you know, people who commit misconduct, you know, they're so inconsiderate. A lot of times they won't identify themselves when you start looking for them. They will do their best to stay and defilate. It's just not fair, is it? Okay, well, keep marching, Chief Ignacio. And let's see here, getting pretty close to the next break. Let me see who I got here in the green room. It's Greg. Yeah, let's entertain Greg before we go to the next break. Howdy, Greg.
Hey, how are you doing, Bob?
Good.
Hey, I got a question. Does Gov Guam have a drug-free workplace policy?
We do, yeah.
Well, then they have to do an initial drug screening and then random drug screenings.
Well, I think that Brown, what the quote from Senator Brown is correct, and that is that random tests can only be done on people in critical positions, cops.
Okay, now you show me somebody in Gov Guam that's on a critical position that doesn't have oversight on money or what they do for a living, especially GPD.
Well, I said cops, bus drivers, crane operators. Those are the examples that I would give you.
Anybody that touches paperwork that has to do with money.
Hey, Greg, slow down a little bit.
I'm listening.
Yeah,
I'm listening.
Okay.
Bob.
Yeah. I don't think handling money comes within the ambit because there's not a safety factor there. No matter how much money somebody steals from the government of Guam, nobody's going to get hurt or killed or something like that. But if a crane operator, a bus driver, a cop is under the influence of drugs, that's a little different. That's my understanding of the designated employee rule.
Well, okay. Now, private sector, if you're a drug-free workplace, everybody, including the secretaries, are random drug tests. Only for the private sector and not for the government?
I don't think that's correct, Greg. You know,
that is correct. Yes, sir. Yes, Bob, it is.
Yeah.
If you are a drug-free workplace under federal regulations, as a contractor, you are obligated to do random drug tests every quarter.
Well, I just refer you to...
I pee in the bottle all the time.
Yeah, okay.
And I know secretaries that have to pee in the bottle all the time.
Well, it's a pretty good, pretty graphic description of how it works, but I'm not going to tilt with you on this anymore. I do know that there is a Fourth Amendment dimension to the whole drug test thing, you know, the prohibition against unreasonable search and seizure. And that's
okay. You sign a contract.
Greg. I'll tell you what. I'll try to not talk when you're interrupting. Okay. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, and that's where things like the Attorney General's opinion come from. And employers who play fast and loose with it have a problem. Like I said, I'm not going to tilt with you on the federal contract regulations because I don't know that. I don't unlike most of the things I talk about, I'm not an expert on that. So I'll defer to you on that point. And I thank you for a graphic description as to how the test works.
Okay, Bob.
Thank you, Greg.
Take care.
All right. Okay, let's take a short break.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. If you are a small business, you may be interested in a federal program called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. This program can provide federal funds to match equity investments into your company or help you get lower interest rates at local banks. To find out more on how this program can help your small business, please contact your Guam Congressional Office at 475-6453 or at michael.sanicolas@mail.house.gov.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Chili's has the seafood you crave and the flavors you love this Lenten season. Indulge in delicious Lent-friendly soups, salads, appetizers, and entrees, like our loaded baked potato soup, quesadilla explosion salad, our savory Cajun shrimp pasta, or our mouth-watering grilled ancho salmon. Ask about our black bean burger options, like our tasty mushroom Swiss or old-timer with cheese. This is a limited-time offer, so hurry in and enjoy all the tasty Lent options this Lenten season. We're located on the second floor of Two Montans Plaza. At Chili's, savor the moment.
Okay, so here we are, back again with about 8 minutes till that big halftime show. And next on the card, I have our favorite governor, our only governor. And this item on the card has an unusual title. It's listed as the governor versus, I never said that.
The governor versus the governor.
When it comes to a financial relief program, what's in a name? Whether or not the RISE Act gets implemented depends on how you look at it. Governor Leon Guerrero spoke with News Talk 57's Patty Arroyo Thursday morning about the RISE Act that was passed by the 35th legislature in December. The governor recently said she thinks the third round of economic impact payments supersedes the RISE Act because it pays more money. But as GovGuam has started to focus on the new federal financial relief package, some are calling on the governor to pay out the benefits mandated by the RISE Act. The legislature has no authority to appropriate federal relief funds because those funds are under the authority of state governors. That's not exactly correct, but close enough for the purposes of this discussion. The governor, however, said she doesn't take issue with the overall intent of the RISE Act. I'm going to implement. I never said I will never implement the RISE Act. You know, this is the second time when we've heard that famous, I never said that. So here's a tip, Governor, for a politician. When you say, I never said that, you know, it strikes people as, yeah, right. A better way to go about it is this, Governor. When this issue came up before, here's what I said. Not, I never said that.
Let me clarify my words.
Like, I never said that people couldn't go to the beach. She says, I'm going to implement a program that will provide for our people to tide them over. So she didn't say she's going to implement the RISE Act. She says, I am going to implement a program that will provide for our people to tide them over until they get jobs, until they have the means to provide income for their families. And of course, we have the federal programs. Well, this sounds like she's saying, well, I never said that then, but I'm saying it now.
I never said it directly.
The Attorney General issued an opinion that says the RISE Act is still legal, even though GovGuam workers are excluded. And once again, poorly worded sentence, even though GovGuam workers are excluded. The Attorney General issued an opinion holding that excluding GovGuam workers is not unconstitutional. That's what he said. The governor said that even if the RISE Act is legal, she'd prefer a plan that includes them, meaning the government of Guam employees. And of course, when I went through my analysis the other day, that was a key point of the analysis. She wants to be able to say, I looked out for our people. I don't know what they're doing over there at the legislature, dissing loyal, hard-working GovGuam workers and not giving them money under the RISE Act. They have families to feed, too. And then when it's campaign season, if anybody nails her on it, she can say, I wanted to give it to you. I wanted to give it to you, too, but the legislature excluded GovGuam employees and federal employees, so I can't give it to you. And, of course, you know from the explanation here on Tall Tales that when there is a discrimination and you're doing a equal protection analysis, if you're not dealing with a fundamental right or a suspect classification, all you need to do is show that the difference between the treatment of the two different classes is something that anyone could hypothesize a rational state purpose to justify. So that's pretty easy. You know, some people didn't have jobs, didn't get any money. Other people's were on the payroll the whole time and drew their full pay. One gets it, one doesn't. Pretty easy. You don't have to be Oliver Wendell Holmes to understand that one. I guess maybe the governor couldn't understand it. The governor offered the example of the Programan Salapi, a local financial aid program from early in the pandemic. However, the governor admitted that the AG has not given an opinion on whether she can replace the RISE Act with another program, probably because it's a really dumb question. Even if that program fulfills the intent of the law, is more comprehensive and provides more benefits. One of the people calling on the governor to pay out benefits from the RISE Act is Republican Senator James Moylan. Moylan says that if the governor has issues with the RISE Act, there's no reason she can't change it. And then Moylan goes on and what he says doesn't make much sense. We did write a letter to the governor explaining that, Governor, if you have issues with the RISE Act came into law, you can always amend the bill. Well, of course, the governor can't amend anything. If she wanted to and have Democrat senator introduce it on the floor, or you can call us into special session and make some changes utilizing a formula that can address these disparities that you thought was an issue. Or you can simply do an executive order like you did with Programan Salapi issue. Moylan said, really straying off the issue. The issue is the RISE Act. Okay, so I'm hearing the music for the beginning of the start of that big halftime show. So we're going to come back after the halftime show with Duenas versus Moylan.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
China and the U.S. clash in Anchorage. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. A heated exchange between diplomats at the first major meeting between the Biden administration and Beijing.
Secretary of State Anthony Blinken began by listing a series of problems the U.S. wants to address.
Our deep concerns with actions by China, including in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, cyber attacks on the United States.
For their part, China's top diplomat said the U.S. should not be lecturing them on human rights regarding the Chinese crackdown on protests in Hong Kong, for instance, when America is in the midst of its own debate and sometimes violent clashes over racial injustices.
Fox's Jonathan Hunt. China telling the U.S. not to interfere with what it considers internal matters. The two sides will meet again today. On Capitol Hill, the House passes two immigration bills, one to protect so-called dreamers, those immigrants illegally brought to the country as children. The other bill would help migrant farm workers and their families.
But both bills face a steep uphill climb in the 50-50 Senate. Republicans are proposing their own bill that boosts funding for border security, protects dreamers, provides a 10-year path to legal status for undocumented immigrants, and expands visas for agricultural workers.
Fox's Ray Bogan. And President Biden announces today's the day the U.S. will achieve his goal of giving out 100 million COVID vaccinations.
We have gone from 1 million shots a day that I promised in December before we were even sworn in to an average of 2.5 million shots a day, outpacing the rest of the world significantly.
The president says everyone who wants a vaccine can have one by the end of May. America's listening to Fox News.
Half a day. This is Jade Uggan from Security Title, and in celebration of Tomorrow Month, here is a tip on dealing with your land. You might be thinking of giving part of your property to your child or another family member. Once you have subdivided the property and recorded the map, you will also need to record the deed transferring the title. Just drawing the map is not enough to make sure they actually own the land. Protehi I Tanonu. When it comes to your family land, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
The vaccine is officially here, and we aren't just talking about the COVID vaccine, but a financial vaccine at Bank Pacific. We may not be doctors, but we can help you with your financial health. Whether to take advantage of today's crazy low rates, or just a local bank that has your back. At Bank Pacific, we want to help make 2021 your best year yet. Because for 66 years, where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
The idea of creating a committee to investigate the Capitol riot comes to a screeching stop before it really gets started.
The country is no closer to understanding the causes and security failures of the January 6th attack on the Capitol because Republicans and Democrats can't even agree on how to investigate it. Plans to form a 9/11-style commission broke down after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi submitted a draft bill giving Democrats 7 appointees and Republicans only 4. Republicans also sounded off about the scope of the investigation, claiming language in the bill predetermined conclusions about the threat of domestic extremism.
Fox's Jackie Heinrich. Police in Atlanta say nothing is off the table in the investigation of the deadly spa shootings in and around Atlanta, including whether the slayings were a hate crime. Robert Long, who faces 8 counts of murder, says he saw the shootings as a way to control his sexual addiction. Grammy Award-winning singer Dolly Parton gets her own comic book. It's part of the series from Tidal Wave Comics dedicated to inspirational women.
Dolly Parton joins the likes of former First Lady Michelle Obama, singer Cher, women's rights campaigner Gloria Steinem, and even Mother Teresa in having a biographical comic written about her. Parton's philanthropy was recently highlighted by her $1 million donation last year, which helped fund early-stage research by Vanderbilt University with Moderna on its COVID-19 vaccine. Monica DeLuca, Fox News.
The comic hits shelves, real and virtual, on March 31st. And police arrested a woman who falsely claimed to be the wife of Saturday Night Live comedian Pete Davidson after she broke into his New York City home. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Subway's got your flavorful, fresh choices this Lenten season. Sink your teeth into the succulent goodness of Subway's shrimp and guacamole spinach wrap, or go plant-based with Subway's crisp on the outside and generously spiced on the inside veggie patty, or enjoy the classic tuna sub, made with 100% wild-caught tuna, all made with freshly baked breads and topped with garden-fresh vegetables. Get them today at any of Subway's convenient locations. Subway, make it what you want.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. If you are a small business, you may be interested in a federal program called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. This program can provide federal funds to match equity investments into your company or help you get lower interest rates at local banks. To find out more on how this program can help your small business, please contact your Guam Congressional Office at 475-6453 or at michael.sanicolas@mail.house.gov.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Sunday brunch at Mezcla Bistro in Hagåtña is back.
Come and enjoy Mezcla's true taste of Guam.
At only $28.95, enjoy your Sunday with your friends and family with their free-flowing house mimosa or house draft beer. Open for 2 seatings at 10:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m.
Let Mezcla serve up your favorite local foods. Call them at 479-2652
or 479-2653 to book a reservation. Limited seating available.
Mezcla reminds everyone to be safe and stay sanitized. Sunday brunch at Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services.
Another great halftime show. The marching band, the cheerleaders, the acrobats, what we used to have, the card section up in the grandstand, but no more spectators allowed, so we can't do that anymore. And then that barrage of cannon fire at the end. So we're back in the calendar here, and the next item on the calendar is Dueñas versus Moylan. Moylan had been the minority leader up until yesterday, and he's no longer the minority leader. Chris Dueñas is the minority leader, and I sent Ray a note this morning that, and Ray used this on the morning show, that there should have been a soothsayer down by the legislature stirring the soothsayer's pot, saying, "Moylan, beware the Ides of March." A little Shakespearean humor there, sports fans. Yeah, so here's a story that ran in PNC this afternoon. Yeah. New minority leader says change in leadership needed to support those seeking higher office. The Republican caucus in the 36th legislature has chosen Senator Chris Dueñas as its new minority leader. He replaces Senator James Moylan, who was replaced by the caucus on March 18. Moylan, in his statement, hinted that there was discord within the Republican caucus, saying, "Well, I believe that the reasons which led to the decision were unwarranted." There's a picture here in the article with Jim Moylan holding a bunch of grapes. And then the label on the package says sour grapes. Moylan, in his statement, hinted that there was discord within the Republican caucus, saying, "Well, I believe that the reasons which led to the decision were unwarranted. I respect the will of the majority within the caucus." Like he's got a choice. Like he could say, "Well, I don't care what you guys say. I'm still going to be the minority leader."
There's no gavel to fight over.
Yeah. You could get Ray Tenorio to come in as a consultant in the sport known as gavel wrestling. Duenas, in a statement of his own, implied that Moylan was going on his own. It was also hinted that the change was necessary to support Republicans interested in running for governor next year. The lead paragraph in Duenas' statement reads, "The Republican senators of the 36th legislature are changing hands in leadership to allow for greater focus on collective legislative initiatives and support those who have expressed interest in higher office." Who would that be?
I don't know, but it begs a couple of questions.
It begs questions?
Well,
prompts questions.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to beg to ask the question.
All
I'm
right.
prompting the question. Does the legislature leadership, party leadership, encompass the legislature or the entire party?
Just the legislature. Yeah.
Okay. And higher positions, aren't they 3 equal branches?
Well, you know, the usual stepping stone to the governorship is from the legislature.
Here on Guam.
Yeah. In a lot of the states, ironically, it's from the state attorney general. I don't think that's going to happen here.
No, not this year.
Yeah. So, as an example, Ray Tenorio was running for governor for 20 years, before he finally turned in his papers. And so there are certain sort of customs and traditions amongst members of the legislature, and that is that members of your own party, if you could do something that assists them in furthering their own particular ambitions, you usually do it. It's kind of as a matter of comedy, not as a matter of duty. So in a statement, Duenas said, "There's much work to be done. As the Republican minority, we fully support our party members and their goals for higher office. But we also need our leadership in the Guam legislature to be focused on the work and issues at hand. Our aspirations, needs, and priorities evolve. As our aspirations, needs, and priorities evolve, we must remain focused on ensuring that we are doing what we were elected to do, serve our island and its people." Duenas added, "We would like to take this opportunity to thank Senator James Moylan for all his efforts to ensure that everyone has an equal footing at the table, except for Mary Torres, who doesn't have an equal footing at the table because she's not at the table. And I want to assure our dear people of Guam that I will maintain the good work he has done." And I have, there was a release from Senator Duenas, pretty much tracks that press release there. So Ray this morning said he'd like to hear a little bit of history dealing with what some are speculating is the cause of the change in leadership in the Republican minority, and that is the long-standing feud between Calvos and Camachos. And Jim Moylan, of course, would be seen as a Camacho-crat because the last appointed Secretary of Guam and the first Lieutenant Governor of Guam was a gentleman named Kurt Moylan.
Okay.
Kurt quite a figure in Guam politics. Kurt was the youngest person ever elected to the legislature at 25. He was the lieutenant governor of Guam. He ran for governor once, didn't make it, but certainly one of the lights of the Republican Party. Chris Duenas, of course, worked for the Calvo administration. So there you go. He also worked for the Camacho administration, I think. So what is the source of this so-called feud between the Camachos and the Calvos? Well, you go all the way back to the 1960s, and we had two parties on Guam. We had the Republican Party, as you were, strike that. We had the Democrat Party and the Territorial Party. The Democrat Party, I think, became nationally affiliated about 1960. The Territorials were strictly local. In 1964, the Territorials finally got the majority. It lasted one term. They were thrown out the next time around in 1966. Going into 1968, a communication was made from the Richard Nixon camp to political types on Guam, Territorials, not Democrats, obviously, saying, if you guys set up a Republican Party on Guam, I will let the party name the appointed governor if I win the election. Yeah. So, boom, we had a Republican Party. Kurt Moylan was part of it. Obviously, Governor Camacho was part of it. Paul Calvo was not part of it. You keep hearing this, this thing about, well, Paul Calvo did not start the Republican Party. It's like the myth that when the legislature took Cameron Day out of the calendar, we had a typhoon. It's just purely a myth. So Paul Calvo was not a member did not start the Republican Party. In 1960, and the agreement amongst the Republicans was that the person who got the highest number of votes in the 1968 senatorial election would be the one that the Republican Party, the name sent to Nixon, should Nixon win. So in that election, the Republicans actually had a ticket. The Territorials had a ticket. The Democrats had a ticket. All 21 seats went to the Democrats. It's what we used to refer to as a blackjack. One of the things that the Territorials did when they were in power is they made it harder to blackjack, because before the 8th Guam legislature, there was a box on top of either ticket. You marked that box, and it meant you were voting for all 21 senators on that side.
Bingo.
Yeah. So there were a lot of and that was one of the campaign pitches. Hey, vote Democrat. We need a blackjack from you. Yeah. So of course Nixon was elected governor, and Governor Camacho didn't get the most votes. But I don't know exactly how this worked out, but he was appointed by Richard Nixon as the last appointed governor of Guam. And Kurt Moylan wound up as the last secretary of Guam. The number 2 man was not the lieutenant governor. He was referred to as the secretary of Guam. Same duties, same everything. And that was Kurt Moylan. So Carlos was the governor, was elected in 1970, running against, well, there were 3 Democrats running. There was Areola, Bordallo, and Ricky, yeah. So the Republicans as the Democrats had a runoff, and Areola lost the runoff, and lost. Then in the runoff, Ricky Bordallo won, and it was Ricky Bordallo versus Carlos Camacho. Carlos won. He was the governor up to 1974. In the 1974 campaign, Calvo and Camacho, Paul Calvo and Carlos Camacho, were the Republican candidates for the nomination in the primary. Camacho won the primary. So conventional wisdom would say, well, Camacho won the primary, Paul Calvo will fall in line with that. They beat Ricky once. They could beat him again. Didn't happen. Paul Calvo ran a white write-in campaign and a very highly structured write-in campaign. They had a symbol that looked like a lighthouse, and above the lighthouse were the words "Write-in 74." They did a lot of advertising. They spent a lot of money, and they polled enough votes so that Ricky got elected. Needless to say, the Camacho-crats were not overjoyed at this event. So Calvo was so Ricky was the governor. Next time around, Calvo ran against Ricky and beat Ricky. And when Calvo came up for re-election, Ricky beat him. So Ricky pulled a Grover Cleveland, elected out, elected again. Yeah. So that's what happened. And, you know, the popular mythology, I don't know if it is mythology, but nobody has buried that hatchet, that the people still remember Calvo's write-in campaign and the bitterness between the Camachos and the Calvos because of that.
Are we going to need a Calvo to marry a Camacho?
Yeah, I suppose that's how it works.
Just
right?
enough already.
Yeah.
It's 40 plus years.
So people, Ray mentioned that this morning. People were speculating maybe that's what happened here. Just another example of the Calvo Camacho feud. I am not a political savant, but I do pay attention and I do draw inferences and I try to put things together and come up with my own conclusions. I don't think this was an example of Calvo versus Camacho. Now, the distaste that Mary Camacho has for the other Republicans, that I'm not so sure of.
That one's a kind of not a quandary, but it's there.
Yeah.
It's apparent, but it's kind of not talked about either.
It's
except us.
Mokibo.
Yeah, there you go, right?
Yeah, the kind of thing that everybody knows about, but we agree not to talk about. Yeah. So I see this as purely internecine Republican jockeying for position. And there is some talk that Jim Moylan sees himself, and maybe others do too, as potential gubernatorial or lieutenant gubernatorial timber. And where did I see that? I guess it was on Troy's website. That, of course, as the minority leader, Jim Moylan gets a lot of earned media. And earned media is one of the keys to success in politics. I explained earned media a couple days ago. So, you know, the Camacho-Calvo feud theory was that if Moylan's getting all that earned media, this benefits a Camacho-crat, and a Calvo-crat wouldn't like that. I don't think that's it at all. I think that what we saw is that the members of the Republican Party decided that Chris Duenas would be a more effective leader than Jim Moylan, and they replaced him. Same thing happened with Tello Taitigui, if you remember that. Tello Taitigui replaced, what was his name?
Will.
Yeah, Will Castro.
Will Castro.
Yeah. Maybe the same kind of a deal. Now, you know, how this was actually handled, whether it was handled with kid gloves, or if the Republicans just had this long staff with a hook on the end of it, and when Jim was out on the floor of the legislature trying to make a speech, they just pulled him off the stage like they used to do in vaudeville days.
Well, at least it wasn't a big gong,
Yeah,
like the gong show.
The gong show. So I don't know how that happened. And you look at, you know, Moylan's dining on sour grapes. I don't know if that lends any, if that makes it any clearer.
If we never knew that this happened, and we just woke up and all of a sudden realized it. Does it really change anything at the legislature?
Well, the minority leader is an extremely important position. And we saw that with Will Castro. With Will Castro as the minority leader, we really didn't need any Democrats in the legislature. We had Will Castro. So the minority leader obviously has several different tasks. One, he's the shepherd. He wants to keep all of his sheep rounded up and in that same herd. He doesn't want any sheep straying from his herd. When you're dealing with senators, I'll go to another analogy. It's kind of like herding cats. It's not easy. So that's part of it. And then the minority leader is the interface between the minority and the majority. And, if you go along with, what was that guy's theory? There was a movie about a guy, it'll come to me in a second. Anyhow, even though they're on opposite sides, cooperation to a certain degree is beneficial for both. And those kinds of cooperations are worked out between the minority and the minority. Should we recess for dinner now? Should we do this? Should we do that? Etc. And then, of course, the minority leader has to be an advocate for the minority to make sure that the minority members' bills are referred, that they get put on for public hearing and all those things. So the minority leader has to have a fist of steel covered in a velvet glove, so to speak. But both parts of it are really important. So maybe folks saw Chris Duenas as more along those lines than Jim Moylan. And I think Chris Duenas with Bill 11, when the bell went off and the starting gates opened and everybody left the starting gate, Chris was way ahead. He was the one that showed real leadership of the whole group. So maybe that had something to do with it. Okay, time for the seventh inning stretch. And let me see who I got waiting here in the green room. It's who else but another Joe. Okay, another Joe. See you at Wrigley Field.
76 Circle K, the Subaki Tower, and Spa Ayalam bring you another staycation. We are celebrating Mom and all she does. Win a 2-night stay at the luxurious Subaki Tower, get pampered by Spa Ayalam, and enjoy a delicious lunch and dinner at Casa Oceano. All you have to do is purchase $35 or more in 76 fuel and enter to win a staycation fit for a mom. The more you gas, the more chances of winning. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com or any Circle K location for more information.
Hey, big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community, yet national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Okay, so here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago, world's most beautiful ballpark. And I've got another Joe wandering around looking for the popcorn vendor. But the popcorn vendor won't be there in March, another Joe. It's a little too early in the season. So I got to find out, another Joe, are you a Camacho-crat or a Calvo-crat? Or do you want to take the fifth?
I'm not an expert in taking the fifth, Uncle Bob. I'm confused as to whether or not it actually helps because, as you said in previous shows, it might imply that I know something or that.
I don't think anybody'd ever accuse you of that, Another Joe.
Uh-oh, I'm in that secret club that I'm not aware of.
Uh,
What did you go to that club again? I forget. Anyway, with regards to and I wanted to mention that your music, I don't know if you would characterize that as a big band. I think it's but definitely has a pretty healthy horn section, which you don't hear a lot of music nowadays of a horn section. But back in the old days, right? You didn't have speakers or amps, so you needed the horn section. Anyway, I digress. I remember a lot of talk about transparency from Senator Duenas, so that obviously that's enlightening, and it tickles your funny bone. So, that sounds really good, and it carries it brings you back to the campaign, right? Everyone wants transparency. You have the commission, I forget what they call it, transparency, or the with Michelle Armenta and Lee Weber, I forget what they call it.
The vigilance group.
Oh, vigilance. There you go. So it tickles everybody's funny bone. Of course, now we're not hearing very much from that PAC, right? Maybe they're satisfied. I don't know. But in that case, transparency. Everyone wants transparency. Then they came up whether there should be drug tests, and of course, Joanne Brown is strongly for it, with the stipulation that it is sure to include tests for cannabis, that they do not exclude, even though it's considered somewhat legal if you're caught with small amounts of the contraband. I don't know if we call it contraband anymore. So that seemed to be a point of contention, and I think Moylan was in support of. I'm not sure if it was Moylan's bill but they were on the same side. So, and of course, the Democrats, I'm not sure if even Republicans voted in favor of the cannabis industry, and so that's kind of where we're at. So is the question answered that Chris Duenas, he's in favor, obviously, of medical marijuana, I guess. I'm not sure how much he's in favor of all the other aspects of the quote-unquote marijuana industry, and it might be interesting to hear about in the near future.
I guess we'll hear about it. He's our next caller, Another Joe.
Oh, I better hurry up real quick, then. He's a bigger name here. Definitely want to hear about it from him. And but Kebab, you're speaking about past history. There's quite a few big names, family names out there in the past that have been in the news, where certain family members of these political families were somehow involved in, maybe the kids or whatever, and involved in something drug related. I don't know that I've ever heard anyone from the Moylan family. Other names I've heard, so I can see why Moylan would be in strong support of testing for drugs, because I haven't heard so much of the Moylans being involved in that, but I have heard other families, which I will not name. So anyway, thanks for your time with Kebab, and I will let the senator to get out real quick, and thank you very much.
Okay, Another Joe. There he goes, Another Joe riding off into the sunset, clearing the way for, and I love the way Chris's entree into the show. Even if he hangs up after that, it's still worthwhile. Go ahead, Chris.
Half a day, Your Honor, Honorable Marine, Senator, my favorite talk show host, and also my favorite conservative. I have to add something in there. As you point out, the constitutional nature of the beginning of Tall Tales, it gives you all you need to know about of how Bob is going to handle things on his show, and I always enjoy this show.
Thank you, Chris.
So I heard you, give a really, in-depth analysis of history and of some of the, potential talking points, I guess, of this leadership change. wanted to start with the fact that I served all 8 years of the Camacho administration, 6.5 years as the Director of Department of Youth Affairs, and 1.5 years as the Director of Department of Land Management. And I served 2 terms in the legislature, and when I was unsuccessful for re-election, I finished with the Cabo administration.
So Chris, you're a switch hitter.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I guess you can kind of see where maybe where I'm going with this.
I can.
Yeah, and so the 2 years as the governor's representative, as a legislative liaison, and a senior staffer for Governor Cabo, and then completed the 2 years with the Cabo administration as another 2 years as the president of the Guam Housing Corporation. And so I have very, very strong feelings about both families, and I have very strong, recollections of the success of both of the governors. Actually, all 3 governors: Governor Camacho, all 4 really. Governor Camacho 1, Governor Camacho the son, Felix, and also of course Governor Paul Cabo and Governor Eddie Cabo. And so there is no faction to me. I've always, my father, brought me into this world and brought me up, and I became a card-carrying Republican. My father was before his went home to be with the Lord, was a stalwart Republican, and a very strong conservative all of his life, as many of his brothers and sisters and in the Dueñas family, the children of Pepin Song. So leading up to what I wanted to mention was a lot of the focus from the caucus, and the reason for kind of the wording of my release is that I have a deep appreciation for Senator Moylan and his aggressiveness. A lot of the very fundamental things that he has championed as a senator, both in the 35th and now in the 36th, of conservative policies, smaller government, fiscal responsibility. And I think he's done, yeoman's work, really, when it comes to those issues. And Senator Moylan is an individual who is very driven, and a lot of the focus you see by his media presence and by everything else that how he conducts himself, is very very much high profile in the nature on which he manages his office, and he's done an excellent job. I think when it comes to the minority leadership, as you were mentioning, in terms of some of the duties and responsibilities, it's a little bit sometimes, as the minority leader and minority leaders and speakers that I've seen function well before and effectively have actually had to take a back seat, to their agenda and what they may want to do many times, and basically give to the caucus what the caucus needs in terms of, as you mentioned, shepherding along the bills. We have Frank Blas Jr. as the minority whip, and also along with Mary Torres as the representatives on the Rules Committee, and they've been extremely effective at getting our bills on board. Jim has worked well with CORE as well as the leadership, and I'll continue that. I have a similar relationship with CORE and with the Speaker. So I think that that's going to be pretty seamless across the board. But I just see myself as concentrating more on the group effort. I'd like to see a Republican majority in the 37, and I'd like to see us continue to do the work of ensuring that the current administration is held accountable for, particularly in light of a report recently put out on the sole source procurement that's very concerning to a lot of our people, and the impending arrival of $661 million to Guam, that I think requires legislative concurrence, if not working directly alongside many of the agencies as those expenditures go forward. So that is my focus. My focus is to make sure that I work with every single one of the dynamic representatives from our minority and do everything that I can to make us successful, and that's what I'm going to try to do, Bob. And with God's help, I'll be successful.
Well, on behalf of at least one loyal Republican, I wish you nothing but success, Chris. And as far as minority leaders are concerned, I had an opportunity to observe the master of minority leaders, Mark Forbes. And Mark Forbes in the 27th Guam legislature was the architect of the strategy that made the Republicans the majority in the 28th Guam legislature. Now, you can't give sole credit to just a single person when you're talking about that many people, but had it not been for Mark Forbes, I don't think we'd have gotten the majority in the 28th Guam legislature. So it's an extremely critical position, and I hope that you can be that effective so that we're looking at a Republican majority in the 37th, Chris.
Well, Bob, gentlemen like yourselves, and as we stand on the shoulders of individuals like yourself and an eventual speaker, Mark Forbes, along with others. I'll start naming names, Speaker and Pinko and others, and I'll get in trouble here. But the fact of the matter is that absolutely, I have to say that because I was a part of that team, albeit unsuccessful, but that's kind of where I cut my teeth on understanding what the process is to run for office. I think the most effective thing that Mark did was exactly what I'm talking about. He was unselfish. He made sure that everybody's platform was on point. He made sure to include everyone. He did commercials where every candidate would have, a representation of their position and their platform. And, we went to fiestas together. We campaigned together. He put out the pledge, 11-point pledge, I believe it was, Bob, if I'm not mistaken. And it was very succinct. It was all the strong points of an effective government. And you were extremely successful during those 2 terms. One standout, of course, that still today is probably hallmark legislation for education, and that is Every Child is Entitled to an Adequate Education Act. Really the the blueprint for a good education and an adequate education and an education that would serve every child if it was properly enacted. So you guys, along with all of the team members that helped you, Joanne Brown, so many names to really throw out there. Your effectiveness really was exactly that cohesiveness, that ability to put the group first. And as an individual, of course, candidate, you go out and do your thing. Of course, you have to get your own identity. You have to be able to, resonate with the people as an individual, but we did waves together. A lot of that was exactly the leadership of then Minority Leader and eventually Speaker Mark Forbes, who I hold in super high regard. And I guess I'll end with this, Bob, if you will let me. Once again, condolences to the Forbes family on the passing of his father, who's, I believe, viewing and funeral will be coming up soon. And also, once again, deep condolences also on the passing of Auntie Rose Ada, Roseanne Ada, the wife of Governor Ada. Just a really class act of a first lady, and someone who I admired as well as a young person. I campaigned for Ada Blas during the time when they were running. That's my father, brought me out there, and we hustled, and we delivered brochures and did everything else. But watching that family and First Lady Roseanne, definitely a classy and dignified woman, and so condolences to Governor Ada and the family as well.
Okay, Chris, I echo your sentiments there for the families of the deceased, and I'm glad you brought that up. And once again, I wish you, well, actually, I'm not going to wish you the best of luck. This is show business, right?
Right.
So, Chris, go out there and break a leg.
Will do, sir. Will do, sir. And we'll keep in close touch as we go forward, and a lot of the major initiatives, particularly of the Republican minority, continue to be rolled out. And I won't be a stranger to, like I said, my favorite talk show, Tall Tales.
Yeah, well, I just love it when you call and introduce yourself. Thanks again, Chris.
Take care, my friend.
All right. So, Chris Duenas, the new minority leader of the Republicans at the legislature, called in here to Tall Tales. Set the record straight. Okay. Hooray for Chris. Okay, let's go on to the next item on the card. This is the Chamorro Land Trust Commission versus the Chamorro Land Trust. And you'll recall that the Chamorro Land Trust, again, a little history lesson here, in 1975, Senator Paul Bordallo shepherded a bill through the legislature that created the Chamorro Land Trust Act. And the provisions of the act were that all government property, all property that was owned by the government, one exception, Crown lands, was designated to be available lands. And directors were told that if you need some of that government land to accomplish your mission, you must designate it, because all undesignated lands, it becomes available lands for the Chamorro Land Trust. So as an example, the Department of Corrections had to hang on to the land that the building was on. But there's some other land that didn't have any buildings on it, became part of the Chamorro Land Trust. So all of that government land went into the Chamorro Land Trust. And in the beginning, people who were Chamorros could apply and be granted 99-year leases to those plots of land for $1 a year. There were agricultural leases and residential leases. Well, that had to be changed later on because the part of the Department of Justice brought suit based on the unconstitutionality of the initial construction of the Chamorro Land Trust Act. So now, in order to be eligible for a lease, you have to be able to demonstrate that you lived on land that was taken by the United States government by eminent domain, or that you farmed or ranched on that kind of land, or the descendant of one of those kinds of persons. And you're entitled, you were eligible for that 99-year lease. Well, nothing happened from 1975 till 1995. No governor ever implemented the statute. No one was ever appointed to the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. It was just another one of those really nice statutes. I'm sure Paul Bordallo got some good photo ops out of it, and a couple slaps on the back, and that's as far as it went until Angel Santos came along. And Angel Santos did a sit-in on the lawn of Government House, did a demonstration there, asking that the governor appoint members of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission and commence the implementation of the act. The governor at that time, Governor Atta, didn't want to do that. So Angel hooked up with Mike Phillips. Mike Phillips brought suit against the governor, requiring him to appoint members of the commission. The Attorney General at that time was appointed by the governor. The Attorney General, Elizabeth Barrett Anderson, opposed the plaintiffs in that lawsuit. B.J. Cruz, who at the time was a Superior Court judge, ruled in favor of Angel Santos and directed the governor to appoint members to the Land Trust Commission and to implement the act. So that happened, and it was like it was like an engine from the very beginning. It was like an engine where one of the spark plugs was fouled, and the ignition points were never properly set, and the timing gear was one tooth off. So it ran, but it didn't run very smoothly. Yeah, that's kind of how it sounded, right? So, so the first thing that happened was they decided that the land would be would be leased to those who applied, first come, first serve. Even people who own land would be eligible for Chamorro Land Trust land. So one day, I don't remember exactly when it was in 1995, but long lines of people. It's kind of like the long lines that we see during this pandemic for free food. Long lines of people came along and filled out papers and got signed up and established a position in that line. First come, first served.
What year was this?
95.
90. Wow.
Yeah. So that was the way the system was supposed to operate. But during the peak of Feharan administration, when she was chairman of the Land Trust Commission, we found out that it wasn't working right at all, because the leases were supposed to be signed by the chairman of the board of the commission. They weren't. They were signed by the director or even maybe the deputy director. So all those leases were void. People were allowed to swap places in line. So somebody who signed up in 1995 would swap his place with someone who signed up in 97. So the second person moves way, way ahead of a lot of other people. Of course, we all know how that works, right? There's nothing worse than being in line, any line, for the movies, to pay your bill or whatever, and some smart aleck comes along and steps in front of the line. So that's exactly what happened, and it happened a lot. And it happened with some pretty high-powered people like Raging Bisco Lee. And it happened up in Barragata Heights, and we found out about it because Michael Borja, who was the director of land management at that time, cut a deal with Public Works to open up a road to these really valuable pieces of land trust property that had been leased, some on the basis of a land swap. So when that road was built, it created a drainage problem. It caused everybody's attention to this. And the farther into it that you got, the worse it was. Michael Borja, the director of land management, who was at the time the administrator for the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, signed one of the leases in both places as the director and as the lessee. And it was just a horror story. And the Attorney General said all of those line swaps are void. You can't fix them. You can fix the leases that weren't properly signed, but you can't fix the line swaps. So this was, let me break for a second here for the home stretch, and then I'll take this one in for the home stretch.
Mezcla Bistro welcomes you this Lenten season with some of your favorite seafood specials, house-made especially for you. Try our fisherman's platter, fish tacos, grilled local catch salad, spicy garlic butter shrimp, candied salmon, and even our creamy lobster padka prao pasta. Don't forget to ask about our Lau Lau Sa Island seafood purse. You will not want to miss this limited-time seafood special, open from Monday through Saturday for lunch and dinner in Agana. Call 479-2652 for reservations. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Listen to The Point. Any speaker, anytime. Check us out on your FM radio at 93.3, 104.3 HD3, thepoint.gu, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and tune in. And announcing radio.com. Download the app and hear The Point. Get the latest news, sports, entertainment, and more.
On demand.
Your phone is digital. Your life is digital. And we are too. 93.3, The Point.
So here we are, the home stretch on Tall Tales. And it's one of those days again. It's a Friday, a day that Jose and I do not look forward to. In 6 more minutes, it'll be the end of today's show. That means Jose and I will have a 70-hour period of no Tall Tales. We do it every week. Every week it seems to get a little harder, but somehow we struggle through it, come back redeemed, full of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed on Mondays at 1600 and start another week of Tall Tales. So the home stretch, I was talking about the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. So it was what it looked like, all of these things that came out, land agent, people who worked at the Department of Land Management cutting nice deals for their sisters and stuff like that. So it was just a mess. So Pika Fayeren was the chairman of the commission, and she said, we're going to investigate here to see if anybody did anything wrong. So a month later, she said, we finished our investigation, and no one did anything wrong. During this period of time, Frank Uggan, who was a senator, introduced a bill that I thought was the only way to go. Frank's bill would have allowed the governor to hire a retired judge to take over more or less as the trustee for the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, push the commissioners aside, go in, write the rules and regulations for the land trust, which has never been done, and root out all of the wrongdoing and see to it that the people that did the wrongdoing are properly dealt with, fired, suspended, whatever. But Tom Hadda almost single-handedly was able to deep six that bill, so it never went anywhere, and that's another story in itself. But because that didn't happen, the Chamorro Land Trust Commission never really got cleaned up. They never really went back and solved those old problems. So the new executive director or the administrative director of the land trust is Jack Haddock, and I've spent a little time explaining on the show how Jack Haddock, as far as I could see, confessed to a forgery at an open meeting of the commission. So that's kind of where we are today. It doesn't look like things are getting any better. So today I titled this part of the card, Chamorro Land Trust Commission versus the Chamorro Land Trust, because I can't think of any body that has been more injurious to the Chamorro Land Trust than the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. And here's the story. This ran in KOM. CLTC apparently gave two people the same lease 10 years apart. During today's CLTC meeting, it was revealed that in 1997, a residential lease was given to a lessee for a lot in Jigo. But then, 10 years later, in 2007, the same lot was given to someone else. No! Trial by ordeal. The original lessee, Terry Malari, has been paying property taxes on the CLTC lot for a decade. I left many messages with different people only to find out that it's no longer under my name. I've been paying taxes on this property since 2007 to today, Terry Malari said. I'm up to date. I was never informed. I don't have any political ties. I don't have any connection. I'm asking for what's right. And yes, I'm very dumbfounded that this was given to someone else, and I was never contacted. Wow. Yeah, and I mentioned the other day, Jack Haddock tried to slide one past the board where people swapped positions in line, and the swapper wasn't even eligible. So your imagination can run wild with this one.
It's like they're spinning a wheel.
Yeah.
Wherever it lands.
Your imagination can run wild with this one. So people may have said, Terry Malari, who's that? Let's give it to this guy over here. The CLTC land agent said he was working on providing another lot to the lessee who was given the same lot in 2007. So just let it go. You know, just give him another lot. No harm, no foul. We won't worry about it. Okay, that's it for today. Coming back on Monday, I've got Bavacqua versus MT Green. So you want to make sure you tune in for that.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
China-U.S. tensions at a high-stakes meeting. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. Both sides agree the first face-to-face diplomatic meeting between the U.S. and China is not going well. Secretary of State Antony Blinken began the meeting in Anchorage, Alaska yesterday by listing a series of problems the U.S. wants to address,
including in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, cyber attacks on the United States, economic coercion toward our allies. Each of these actions threaten the rules-based order that maintains global stability.
China's top diplomat said the U.S. should not be lecturing them on human rights when America is in the midst of its own debate and sometimes violent clashes over racial injustices. And the Chinese warn the U.S. not to judge or try to influence what China considers its own internal affairs.
Fox's Jonathan Hunt. On Capitol Hill, the House passes 2 immigration bills, one to protect so-called dreamers, those immigrants brought to the country as children, the other to help immigrant farm workers.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says immigrant communities are strengthening the country. The 2 bills did win support from several Republicans, though House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy urged opposition.
So far, the Biden administration and congressional Democrats aren't providing any solution.
McCarthy says lawmakers should focus on an ongoing crisis at the border.
Fox's Jared Halpern. And today, the U.S. will reach President Biden's vaccination goal of 100 million shots. That's faster than expected.
We expedited critical materials in vaccine production, such as equipment, machinery, and supplies. We work with vaccine manufacturers to speed up the delivery of millions more doses and brokered a historic manufacturing partnership between competing companies.
America's listening to Fox News.